Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan, excited to dive back into the whiskey thing. I know I took like a full week off on the channel. I had to fly out West Coast, spend a week out there doing some consulting work. So I just got back to town and back into the grind. So I apologize for my brief absence and appreciate your patience. But hey, I got a sample sent in to me by Mike, one of our viewers. Big shout out to Mike. He's the one that sent in the Boss Hog sample as well. So really appreciative to you. But this comes from Dixon Deadman's 2XO brand. And if you're not familiar with 2XO, we've covered, I think we've covered some of their stuff on the channel before. I got a bottle back there. You can see the black top right there. Anyways, neither here nor there. So Dixon Deadman, what he's been doing is, he sources whiskey, high quality Kentucky whiskey, and then he rebarrels them. 2XO stands for 2 times oaked. So he's basically rebarreling to get new flavor profiles on what he thinks is really top shelf Kentucky whiskey. So this one is the Gem of Kentucky. Okay, this is a very limited release, and this is the, as far as I know, the only single barrel, double barreled. I know that doesn't make any sense. It's a single barrel, double barreled product. I know that's kind of confusing. It sounds a little contradictory. But yeah, so it's also his own mash bill. It's a high rye mash bill, 35% rye, that he came up with the mash bill, the recipe, and then hired a distillery in Kentucky, which is not disclosed, to distill it for him, to make it for him. Get that poured. Most people assume that this is Barton. 1792 Barton are the distillers of the actual juice. We don't know that for sure. Dixon Deadman is a pretty well-renowned blender. And I would not be surprised that he could probably knock on anybody's door and get them to distill his juice for him. So yeah, that's what this is. And there's a couple things that I want to mention before we get into this. First and foremost, so he proofs it down just slightly. The lower than barrel proof is what he says. So it's around 108 proof. So pretty high in the proof. The other thing is that they full scent on branding. All right, so beautiful bottle. Sort of the gold embossing on the bottle. All of these things make this an expensive product, right? He has to pay for somebody else to distill the juice. He has to buy single barrels of it, right? And then buy new barrels to rebarrel that single barrel into. And then since he's not proofing it down very much, he's not able to spread the juice out around as many bottles because he's not mixing it with as much water. And then spending a lot of money on the branding to make it look top shelf. And most reports about this whiskey are that it is beautiful in terms of branding. It is delicious in terms of the way that it tastes. But MSRP for this is $200. I'll just get it out there. I'll just throw it out. It's a $200 bottle of whiskey. And for a lot of people, that's an immediate deal breaker. We all sort of draw our top end somewhere. We draw our lines somewhere and say, you know what, I love whiskey, I love bourbon, but I will never spend more than $75 on a bottle of bourbon. I'll never spend more than $140 on a bottle of bourbon. Some of us, it's higher than that. Some of it's lower. So it all depends on where you draw your lines. Otherwise, you could I think like a pour of this would probably be anywhere between $20 and $30 for a pour at a whiskey bar. And that might be the way to go. But let's get into this and see if it is worth that $200 price tag. The nose is really pretty. I get a lot of toasted brown sugar. Almost a savory note to it as well. I almost think of like a sesame bun. A little bit of a savory bread note to it, And I want to say a little bit of a fruity character to it as well. I think of blackberries on the nose. And the oak is there, but it's not as like pungent as I thought it would be. I thought it would be like really in your face with the oak, with it being a twice barreled product. But it's not over the top. All right, let's get in on this, huh? Well, one of the first things I get on the sip, on the palate of that, is black licorice and anise. Black peppercorns as well. Transition into the later end of the palate and then on into the finish. Those oak notes come through. A little bit of brown sugar. The fruitiness I get on the nose is lost on the palate for this. But I will say that a lot of people report very different findings when it comes to tasting this bottle, because it is a single barrel product. So you do have a lot of variety there, barrel to barrel. Also, Deadman is using various levels of char on that second barrel as well. So that's also a factor in creating a lot of variety within one single, one product line. Almost get on second sip. The impression of a Tennessee whiskey. You know, that Lincoln County process, the charcoal filtration. I get some of those same charcoaly notes, burnt wood. If you told me this was like maximum char level, I would believe you on that second barrel. After that second sip, the finish starts to bring forth a little bit of like notes that remind me of a Kansas City barbecue, like pit smoke. So I just took like 2 minutes to let that sit a little bit because that char is so heavy. And I wanted to see if I let it sit in the back of my palate and open up a little bit back there, maybe some new things would come forward. But that pit smoke, that barbecue, that charcoal, and a little bit of the anise and the the black licorice notes, those are really sort of the predominant notes I'm getting off of this. I will say it is very oily. Like, it coats everything in here. I will say the more I sip on it, the more the front end of the palate softens up a little bit. The tail end, though, just completely dominated by that char level. So we gotta like rate this. We gotta talk about value. You know, at that $200 price point, it's pretty steep. Do I like this? You know, and another thing to keep in mind, like I said, your bottle may vary from the bottle I'm tasting, you know, from barrel to barrel to barrel. Now, I do like it. I think it is very tasty. I tend to really like double-barreled products in general. I like what the second barrel is able to contribute, especially when you have like a toasted barrel, lightly toasted barrel, instead of something with heavy char on it. I like a lot of those brown sugar notes, sometimes toasted marshmallow that you get on that second barrel. This one doesn't read quite as delicate, and it doesn't read as oak forward. It's more char forward. It is not unpleasant, but we got to talk about that $200 price point. Is it worth that? So when I score this, I'm going to score it with that price tag in mind, right? If it gets a 7, it doesn't mean it's a better whiskey than every 6 whiskey out there, or worse than every 8 whiskey out there. It just means that for what I'm tasting in comparison to the price that you're going to pay to get access to it. You know what I mean? So I think for me, I really I want to rate it higher, but that price tag is so steep. $200 to get into this bottle is a lot. And like I said, that is because he had to pay for somebody else to distill it. He had to pay for double cooperage for this thing because he had to get the original aging and then a second aging on it. He had to pay for all the branding on it as well. And so because of that, that's a lot of markup for the product itself to cover your cost of investment. So it's not that I think that the price tag is unfair or unreasonable. I certainly understand it, but I am a consumer and my money is precious to me as a consumer, and I'm not willing to just throw it around willy-nilly. As a consumer, you have a right to be selective about where you spend your cash. And I would almost prefer that they just kept the bottling simple if it means cutting the price tag down a little bit. So if I'm going to rate this on my scale, I would have to say, considering how not big a fan I am of that price tag, I think I'd have to give this a 6.8 is where I'm going to rank this. I don't use like an A, B, C, D scale. You know, my key is there on screen for you to see, so you can see what goes into those ratings. So 6.8 is far from being a bad whiskey. I think the whiskey is actually better than 6.8. The problem is the price of admission is too steep for my blood. I have spent that much money on a bottle of whiskey before, and sometimes I regret it, sometimes I do not. I think if I spent $200 on this, I don't know that I'd be super keen to do it again. I would like this a lot more if it was at that same price point as, say, like a Bardstown Discovery Series, Calumet 16. If it was there in that 120 to 140 range, I think that would be a much better rated product for me at that price point. And those are also brands that are sourcing whiskey for those specific bottles. I mean, Bardstown Discovery Series is almost exclusively juice that is not made by Bardstown. Calumet is sourced as well, and that one's a 16-year, and it's way cheaper than this. This is not 16 years old, guarantee you that. I don't think it's age stated. I could be wrong. I don't think it's age stated. I think this is probably around that 6-year age mark. I mean, Calumet 16 is $60 cheaper and has a lot more age on it, just for comparison's sake. So there you have it. That's why I'm going to give the Gem of Kentucky from 2XO a 6.8. Really tasty. Find a way to make it cheaper. And I think more people will be keen to get this bottle. Thanks so much for tuning into the video. I appreciate each and every one of you. Big shout out to my Patreon supporters who support by funding the bottles that we get to buy and review here on the channel. And each and every one of you, like Mike today, who sends in samples for me. I am so thankful, because I would run out of content, because I'd run out of bottles really quick if you guys weren't sending me samples of stuff, because whiskey's expensive, like today. And feel free to join our Discord. We talk about whiskey, life, all that stuff. And you can join the Patreon group as well for as little as $1 a month. Cheers, my friends. May you live richly and get better with age. Be warm and well fed, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.